So now that we have our web application set up, that's good for a structural piece, but now we actually need to put the content in it. I've spoken a bit about site collections, but let's dive a little bit deeper into them and take a look at what that entails. The site collections are containers for one or more sites in SharePoint. And you'll actually find this kind of interesting because the users will only see the sites when they visit SharePoint itself, but there's some additional capabilities in the site collections that are not apparent to the users even though they're in there, that sites will look pretty much the same at the top level, and as you go down into subsites, administrators will actually see very similar things between the two, but there are some additional pieces that we'll go into in our second demo. The sites actually are the content containers. The sites have the various lists, libraries, web parts, and the different information that makes up a SharePoint repository. So when you go in there, you'll actually see the content itself is inside the sites, which are inside the site collections, which are inside the web application. We got layers upon layers upon layers. This is part of the challenge that many people see with SharePoint. Knowing how these layers are broken out and why they're there makes things a lot easier once you get the hang of it. Site collection owners are the first tier of your power user owned containers. I say that you'll actually have the site collection owners. Generally, they are not inside IT. They are generally inside your business groups or your various other roles, but they will have ownership of that content and generally who has access to that. That being said, they may not be the actual owner. They may be administrative staff inside of maybe a department or inside a project team or inside a functional group, but they are actually the ones who start handling that. That being said, this is a place where you do have handoff between those power users and the traditional IT farm administrators. Knowing where that is and knowing that there is the farm administrators will be giving assistance and help to the site collection owners is pretty important at this point. And site collections are the top level at which most users can ever see. And it's so transparent, though, that they may not be aware of it. Many users don't even know when they're in a site collection or a top side of a site collection and when they're anywhere else. SharePoint tries to abstract that away from the actual users themselves, and it's very, very useful for us to have that happen. But just know that when we talk about site collections and sites and web apps, that will not translate very well into your users unless they're extremely well educated users. What you'll see is you'll actually do some of this will bleed over into your developers if you do custom development, because many times they will refer to the site collections as the object model as well, as an SP site or SP page or those kind of things. So you'll see that the different terminology translating back and forth, you as a farm administrator will need to be probably the translator between all the different groups and how they see this elephant that is SharePoint. So we've got the site collection, and we talked just a little bit about it in the web applications about the site structure. But let's look at that. The site structure itself is managed through host headers and managed paths. So the host header itself will bring you into a top-level site collection, and the managed paths will let you have different breaks and structures as you go down that URL path. So you're able to give multiple different top-level collections at different levels into the URL. When we actually put together our new path that's in there, that becomes another top-level site that just happens to be located underneath another top-level site. Again, things get a little bit confusing when you're talking about top from security model and management versus top versus place on the URL. And another item to do is, I mentioned that it can be peers or subsections. Remember that as you're going down, because you're doing different names of those lower level top site collections or SharePoint site collections, different names there can be at the same level. So you may have a projects sublevel SharePoint site collection, and you may have a sites, and then maybe you even have your my sites. So each of these are peers because they may be one level down from the top site, but then they are actually peers to each other. So knowing how that comes together, it actually was just a little bit easier when we were in SharePoint 2003 because the system had this built-in kind of way of not just showing the structure, but actually allowing you to modify it and allow the URL separate from the site collections. When we get into the demo, I'll show you how you can kind of see where it is, but changing it around in from SharePoint 2007 on becomes a lot more flexible, but a lot more static once you get the items in there. And then the host headers can provide the additional grouping. You can actually have different types, such as if HR needs their own portal, you can actually use a host header to break that out and make it very accessible to users so they can actually put the HR or the legal or whatever, so they can come in very easily through your DNS entries without having to put in various ports or actually do lots of deep linking inside the URL path itself. So we've kind of talked about what's in there. Let's get started in creating a site collection. So here we are at our web applications where we created our new site earlier. Now we've got a web application, but now we want to go in and create a SharePoint site collection up underneath it. For this, we'll need to go back to Central Administration, and then we'll go into Application Management. And here we have all of our information about our site collections. For right now, we're just going to create a site collection on our new web application. We come in and note that it's already decided which of our web applications. Now, if we had multiple web applications that were ready for a site collection, we can come in and change. You see that we've got our new site, which has our 1024 socket, or we've got our traditional SharePoint on port 80. We want to work with our new site, so we'll just click there, and we have our correct web application. We'll name the title of SharePoint Collection. So we've got our SharePoint collection, site collection here. Note that our URL is showing us all of the places that we might want to put it in place. We actually have our top tier, which is our root, and then we have our managed paths up underneath it, our sites or our projects. Right now we want to put it on our the base site. It is truly going to be a top site collection. For the experience version itself, if our users are used to 2010, we can give them a 2010 experience. But we probably just we have users where we're actually rolling out 2013, they're going to want to see some changes. So we're going to give it the 2013 experience. And then we get to select a template. These are the out-of-the-box templates. As you've deployed, you're probably going to have some custom templates in place. But right now, I'm just going to choose a project site. And you see we get a quick description. The categories here, collaboration is for where users are working together. We've got enterprise, where our document center documents can be shipped to from all over the organization. E-discovery for your legal groups, your record center for accounting and records and legal groups. And you've got your various items in place. We have our search centers that we were talking about, enterprise and basic, and the rest of those. And then if you have a content publishing, you've got some templates for an enterprise wiki or publishing. It's good to go through and be aware of all of the different information and the different templates that you have deployed in your organization, because people will generally ask about that. But we'll come back into our collaboration and our project site. We're just going to have the administrator account be the owner here, but this is where you'll actually assign the site collection administrator, the owner, the person who will actually have it. And the nice thing about SharePoint, if you're new to SharePoint, is you can actually look up the usernames through your Active Directory. I happen to know what we've got here. It's kind of simple, but I can actually validate it to make sure I won't run into an error later. Do a check name, and it gives me the full account name that I'm putting in there and make sure that it's valid. We said we don't require a secondary site collection administrator, but we can put one of those in if we want to. And I'm not going to put a quota in on the personal site because we're going to talk about those quota templates in just a few minutes. So that's our basic information we need to create our site collection. And you see that now we have successfully created our top level site collection. So now that we have our SharePoint site collections, we're going to look at how we can get rid of them, in what situations. Remember that deleting a site collection removes all the sites and contents contained in that collection. So often sites have many subsites and additional subsites below that. Make sure that your users know that they're not just deleting the top level, but they are deleting everything below it. Because there is some fuzziness or there's some abstraction away from exactly what a site collection and a site is, you want to make sure that the users are very much aware, and possibly before at least site collections are deleted, they review with you and make sure that everything's in place and they know what they're going to remove. Site collections below the deleted one are not deleted. They exist outside of that collection container. When we looked at the different paths that we could create our site collection in the previous demo, so we had the root level, we had the sites, and we had the projects. So looking at those, if I deleted the newly created site collection at the root, it would be deleted, but the site, if I have a site collection at the sites and the projects, those would remain. This can be very confusing for users, especially users that haven't are very business focused and may not have a deep knowledge of SharePoint. So making sure these points are clear and checking for doing validation for deleting is generally very wise. There are policies that can help you by removing the need for your users to do their own deleting. We'll review those in just a minute. Those policies can actually automatically close, which means put the site into read-only and have it for review, but let users know that there's something going on there, and then delete sites after a period of time or unmonitored existence. This is a little bit safer than it sounds because one of the configuration options is to remind the users that their site is either closed or under review for deletion, that they can halt the process. This has been around for quite a while, and this is a process that's generally preferable to having the users delete their own sites. This is a little bit more manageable, and because you can actually work with some of the templates, you can actually, before the site is deleted, have administrative review before those automatic events happen. One of the earlier event handlers that was very popular in versions of SharePoint before now were basically an auto archive event handler, that when a site collection was automatically going to be deleted, it would actually archive the site out before it performed the delete, which was very, very popular with site administrators because that way they could always restore it. We'll look at quotas. We've been kind of passing through the quotas as we've been reviewing earlier, but know that the sites can have quotas applied to them to manage the resource usages. The quota templates are created at the central administration level. We'll go in and review those and create a new quota template in just a moment, so you can actually see what you're doing there. And quotas can be removed at the lower levels. Applying the quota to the site collection provides the option for them to be used at lower levels, but does not require it. So you can actually set up a quota that the site collection administrators can use, but it doesn't actually have to be there. So it's very good to actually have at least the optional quota in there so that you can make sure that sites don't blow out, or you actually get lots and lots of content in there that may not be required, or that actually causes you problems with your resource predictions in the future. And then your cleanup policies. The site collection policies manage the cleanup events. What's going on, what you need to do. This is the piece that I was mentioning about those automatic deletions. Sites that have been in existence for extended periods can have reminders sent. be closed for integration so that you can't pull tasks out and maybe have it in your Outlook. You can make sure that users know that something's going on and this is a site that is no longer active, or even have the site deleted automatically. The owners can delay or reset this process if the collection is still in active use. What happens is that after a certain period, the system itself, if configured, will start checking to make sure that the site is still active for your users. So if there's any issues there, you can actually come back and say, well, we're still using this. The project is now 6 months longer than we thought. We knew we thought we might need to archive this at this point. Not really the case. We still need to keep everything there. So you have a lot of control over here. Nothing's going to be deleted before you actually have some chance to make sure everything's in good shape, and you can move on from there. So now we're going to go over and review those configuration options and show you some tips and tricks about how to put together. So here we are back at Application Management. First, we're going to start out by visiting the Delete a Site collection. We're going to come in and say, we want to delete a site collection. It's by default not giving us one because we want to make sure we get exactly the right one. Let's change the site collection. And you can see we're on our web application 1024, and we only have one site collection, so we can choose that one. See, it's got the email address, it's got all of the information, so we can know that we actually have the right one. So now we're coming in, you're about to delete this, it gives you the information, and please note the warning. This will permanently delete all content and user information. Hard drive space will not be recovered immediately, so it'll take a little bit of time to clean it up. Know that that's in there. For right now, I'm not going to delete this. When we come back in, we'll clean up our site collections in another way. So we'll return back to Application Management. What we want to do, first of all, is we've got site collections that we're going to be working with. Let's just show you how you can view all of your site collections. On our site collection list, we just have our first one for our 1024. Note that we actually had a number of potential site collections, which was our sites and our projects, but we didn't actually provision those, so those don't show up here. So we can actually see that we've got those managed paths over on the base, but they're not actually site collections at this point, so they're not showing up. Let's go back to our default SharePoint, and you can actually see that on the port 80, we actually have two My Sites. We have or two SharePoint site collections. One is the My Site, which is created by default, and then there's the top level, so we can actually see back and forth which collections we can work with, and we can know what we have. As you may be aware, that you can get these lists can be very, very long, so you've got a URL search that you can actually find the ones that you're looking for. So that's the way to actually go in and find which site collections you actually have. Now let's look at the Quota templates. What we want to do is we've got our personal site, which since we have a My Site that was already created out of the box, let's go in and create a new Quota template. We're going to do a new blank template name, which is Project Sites. And we're going to limit the site storage itself. We're going to be generous, and we're going to give them 10 gigabytes. Nice, good size. I'm sure we'll very quickly need to come back in and see what else needs to be done. But let's start with that. And let's start warning the site warning email when we get to 8 gigabytes. So coming up on it, we've got 2 gig left. Send a warning and let them know that they're getting close. It's sent to the site administrator to inform them of the issue, let them know. Generally, we know what's going to happen with that. They're going to immediately come to IT and the farm administrators and go, I need more storage. But at least this way you can be aware of what's going on, see what's happening, and make the users aware that storage is not infinite, which is sometimes the most important piece. There are also sandbox solutions inside of SharePoint. Your devs are going to be the ones that are going to be looking at a lot of this, but you'll be able to handle that. What we're going to do is we're going to also set in a 300 point limit. This means that we can't have one application just spinning away using up CPU all day long. We're going to say you can use this and we'll let you use up so much CPU cycles and resources per day. And we will let the owner, administrator, know that when they're using over 200 points per day, so that we can actually either review and see if this is the right level. Maybe it needs some optimization. There's a lot of things in there that we can see. They know that they're getting to their limit on their points, and they should be aware and come check with administration and see what else needs to be done. Maybe it's important enough that there's going to be another that's moved off into an app server, and that's going to be another server on our farm, but we need to know about that and we need to be notified. So we say, okay. And now we've created our quota templates. We can actually come in and look at our site collections and our locks. We actually have our templates that I just put the project sites on, which we have our information here. You notice these are all fixed information. We'll need to go into the template itself to change it. We can actually set the lock for this site. We can actually say can't add, which means the content can be edited. If you already have files in there, new versions can be done, but no new content can be. Or we can actually set it up to read only. Farm administrator controlled read only lock, so that means that I've got access to it, but the SiteCollection doesn't. Or I can actually say the site administrator controlled read only lock, so they can actually control it themselves. And then we can actually come down and say no access. And there's a spot in here so you can actually put lock information. So this can tell you what's going on with your quotas and what's happening with the lock status for each of those. We're not going to lock it just yet, but know that you've got that control on the site collections. You can actually go in and change the site collection administrators if something may have happened and that site collection, if the primary site collection administrator maybe takes another job, is transferred, something happens, and you realize that after the fact and they haven't identified someone, you can come in and assign a new site collection administrator. So you don't lose that ability to have someone as an owner of it. You've got a history of that. All this is actually logged, so you can actually go back and see who has been owners of the site collections, but that's just a quick little piece in there. And then we were talking about the confirm sites and site usage confirmation. What we want to do is change our web application. Always be careful of which web application you got. So we're going to go in and say, send an email notification to the users of unused sites. That means that it hasn't been in use for a while. Send notifications 90 days after site collection creation or its use is confirmed. That means after 3 months, it'll check and say, hey, are you still using it? Which is a good time. And then after that, it will continue doing it for every 3 months just to say, hey, are you still there? It sends an email. There's a link in it straight for the user, just to click and say, yes, I'm using it, and it resets the timer. It will run daily. You can actually, if you've got lots and lots of site collections, you may want to have it just run weekly and run at a time that's off peak. And then you can actually set it up to automatically delete the site collection if not confirmed. Permanently, this does not archive it. It just does permanent deletion. What this does is it will delete the site collection after sending 28 notices, which means that after 90 days, it will send the first notice. And then at your interval that you've got set up here, so the way we have it configured, after 90 days, it would check for the site collection to see if it was being used. If it was not responded to, it would send a weekly notice saying, hey, please let me know if you're using it. And after 28 weeks, it would actually delete the site and it would be gone. So you can actually set that up so that your users are well warned when things are happening, but you don't have these sites that are out there that no one really owns, no one really pays attention to, and that are taking up space on your server.